penetrate into the essence of all being and meaning, and to release the fragrance of that inner attainment for the guidance and benefit of others, by expressing in the world of forms, by expressing in the world of forms truth, love, purity, and beauty, by expressing truth, love, purity, and beauty, to penetrate into the essence of all, and to release the fragrance of that inner attainment for the guidance and benefit of all, by expressing in the world of forms truth, love, purity, and beauty, by expressing truth, love, purity, and beauty. This is the soul game. This is the soul game. This is the soul game, which has intrinsic and absolute worth.
Now it's my pleasure to ask Buz Connor to join us from Myrtle Beach. Buz.
Would you like to take a stretch break? Maybe 60 seconds? No? You're all right? You're used to sitting this long? That's a great one. That's a good idea. No? Great. Jai Baba, everyone. On behalf of the board and the staff of Mayor Spiritual Center, I'd like to thank Buz Connor and Sufism Reoriented for inviting the center to be part of this today. I'd also like to know if this stand can raise a little higher. Does anybody know? Like this? No. No, not really. Then I will squat a little. As anyone knows who has followed Meher Baba in the West for even a little while, the finding of Meher Center is one of the most colorful and inspiring stories of the Avatar's advent in the West. But of course, like all things in Meher Baba's life, the story began in the East. Elizabeth Patterson and Norina, as the Murshida said, were in Ajmer in 1941. And Baba told them to locate property in the US for a center that could one day serve as his home in the West, where his followers could come and be with him. Now, by this time, Elizabeth and Norina were fast friends in Baba. They had met in 1931 up the Hudson River when Baba first came. And Elizabeth told us that Baba had told them that they were twin souls in his love and service. So they were together a lot. He also said that Jane, one interesting story is Narina died in 57, I think in Yupon Dunes. There was even a viewing of her body there, I believe. And the next night, Elizabeth met Jane Haynes at a theater. And she adopted the Haynes family, and he said Jane and Elizabeth were twin souls in his love and service. And it was unusual for a person to have two. But Elizabeth was unusual, so she could take two. Elizabeth also liked to tell this story. One day, I think it was in 38, I think it was on Mehrabad Hill, Baba told Elizabeth and Narina to go fetch a pair of pants, a big pair of pants, and then to come back. So they did, and then he told Elizabeth to put her left leg in the right pant, and Narina to put her right leg in the left pant leg, and then he told them to walk, which they managed to do after some struggling in synchronicity. They found synchronicity. Baba told them this was how he wanted them to work together for him in the future. And this was no small task because Narina was a fiery personality. If she was a Mas, she'd be a Jalali. Isn't that? She was fiery. She had a temper, and she was used to getting her way. But Elizabeth was Elizabeth, and she had an iron will, was very calm, and she was also used to getting her way. So they were a match. As the Murshid has said, they looked for 3 years all around the country, and then they were vacationing Easter time in 43, and Elizabeth remembered this property. She had seen it, I think, in 1935, first time. So Elizabeth and Narina, after a couple of attempts, got into the center of the center to a knoll where the cabin on the hill is. Have you all been to the center? Yes. Then you know. It's that spot they were standing, and they both intuitively knew this was the place they had been looking for all along. I remember hearing the story in 71 when I first went there, and I thought, why didn't he just tell them? It was her father. He's got this place. Go ask him. It turns out, I've learned from the Mandali and others, that that's not how he works. You gotta find it. The same with the inner life. Why doesn't he just do it if he's God? That's not how he works. Regarding the search for Meher Center, Kitty said, "In love alone prevails." Baba, who lives simultaneously in the past, present, and future, had no doubt visualized and selected the spot long ago. But for reasons of his work, he always acted as though he did not know what lay ahead. A personal story, in the 1970s, my family and I, my father and mother, were having dinner with Elizabeth and Kitty at the center. Now that, in the 1970s, is what you wanted to do. You wanted them to meet Elizabeth and Kitty because Meher Baba was so weird. And Elizabeth and Kitty were not. They were so normal. In fact, they were more than normal. They were extraordinary. And then there was Jane, too. And by then, I had fallen in love with the person I was going to marry, Wendy, so Jane and Wendy were there, too. I married very well. I got right in the door with these Western Mandali, effortlessly. And Wendy doesn't hold it against me at all. So I took my parents, and my father had the presence of mind to ask Elizabeth outright, well, how did you get this property? How did you come by this? And she told the whole story. She took about a half an hour. It was so amazing to hear her say it. I'm reminded of the great video that Alan Cohen did of the interview of Elizabeth. Have you seen that? It's extraordinary. I'm glad you did it, Alan, wherever you are, because I don't think there is another video of Elizabeth. There are films of her in it, and usually because she didn't like to be filmed. In fact, she didn't like to be photographed. We have a photograph of her sitting on the veranda with Mara and Mani, and the tops of her knees are showing, and she's taken a pen and crossed it out along where her knees were. If you catch her in a film with Baba and she knows she's being filmed, she touches the top of her head like, is my hair okay? She didn't like it at all. But that really captures her. It's the Elizabeth that I knew. And of those 5 conditions, the one, when I heard it, I thought, that's impossible. How is somebody going to give you land? And in that video, she says, well, that seems so simple, because only Baba could do that. So, at the end of telling the story, she said, to my father, she said, after Norina and I returned from seeing the property and realizing it was just right, I excitedly went to my father and asked if he could possibly acquire the land. But he looked quite disappointed and said there was no way the Burroughs brothers, they were the ones he was in partnership with, would give up that land because it was the best piece of property the company owned. It was right on the end of all, they had 20,000 acres, 30,000 acres. And it was right at the end, and there was a series of lakes. Long Lake was part of it, was the last lake, right at the end of their property, and Gator Lake, and then there are more lakes that go south. But then she went, with a twinkle in her eye, she said to us, when I walked away from my father, I looked very forlorn and disheartened, like only a daughter could with a father. She did. Then she went on to say, the next morning, when I saw my father at breakfast, he announced with a smile, you know what's coming, that he had spoken with the Burroughs brothers and managed to, as he put it, snip off this piece of property so that he could give it to her. And they, of course, sent telegrams to Bob, and right away he said, yes, that's it. That's the place. And in a cable sent in 1944 that expresses his approval, he said, am happy to find in all your letters about Myrtle Beach everything that I personally and spiritually approve of and sanction. All my lovers should cooperate to make Myrtle Beach the spiritual abode for one and all. Now, that's a curious line, Myrtle Beach. I think because there was no name, this is my interpretation. Some board members don't think this is right, but I do. That since he didn't have a name, he was just referring to Myrtle Beach as the place. In fact, the first name was the Abode for One and All. We have a drawing that was done in sent to Baba with the title, The Abode for One and All. And then they finally settled on Meher Center. So, as Mer should have said, between 1944 and 1952, they worked tirelessly getting this place ready. And Norina had a great artistic vision. She was the one who put in all the paths where the cabins would go. She had the idea for the barn. Elizabeth was the one who got the barn, which is a great story in itself. Elizabeth said, there was nothing done at the center without thought of Meher Baba or without consulting with him directly, or, and this is a really fascinating subject, through this, Baba would speak through Norina. Modeled in the more simplistic styles of Mehrabad and Meherzad, Meher Center, as you know, is populated by small to medium-sized cabins nestled in the woods, coastal South Carolina, lots of trails, and it's very beautiful. And it is in the tackiest little city in South Carolina. There's just no getting around it. I don't think I would vacation there. But hey, tens of millions of people have been through that place and rubbed up against Myrtle Beach. We have an entranceway that was redone probably about 20 years ago. And I don't know how many, it must be 50 cars a day go in and turn around. And actually, the land across the street used to be part of the center, too, where the mall is, and the land where the Walmart is used to be part of the center. Elizabeth sold the land to get money to do the work. So all of this, Baba has brought his humanity right to it, unknowingly. They didn't know. He, of course, knew. He had planned it all along. One of the great expressions of Meher Center was written by Mani. I remember going to India the first time, it was in '71, and meeting the Mandali, and after that, as much as I could go. And them saying, Erich and Mani, how fortunate we were to experience his divinity, because most of us got there because of that. How amazing it was that we got to experience his divinity. They had his physical form. That was their job, his physical form. But we were very fortunate to have his divinity. I didn't believe a word of it, you know. You had Baba. That's what I wanted. But as the years have gone by, and I've spent most of my adult life working for Baba at the center, I've recognized, and she said the reason for that is because if we felt his divinity, we couldn't get anything done. They worked all the time. Their life with Baba was an amazing marathon of, especially the men, of traveling, going from place to place. Baba, who rarely slept, who didn't eat much, they had to keep up with that. And so here's Mani coming to the center in 1952 with Baba. They took the train from New York to Florence, South Carolina, and Elizabeth picked them up and drove directly to his house. And Mani, who was with him physically, said this: "On our arrival, I felt that Baba had already been there. His presence was so strong, and I realized Baba had blessed the center long before. Every nook had so much of his presence, on the bridges, under the trees, at the beach, in the barn, and by the lake. Naturally, it is the one place in the West Baba had specifically directed to be found, but he had already found it before he sent Elizabeth and Norina," back to my comment earlier, "to look for it. He gave the conditions so that the conditions were like clues to the place Baba already was." That really is like the spiritual life, isn't it? He had already planned it before he sent them out to look for it, like a treasure hunt, the spiritual life. So waiting for Baba was Norina in Baba's house. She was not well at the time. There's a fascinating story about Norina's health, her mental health, that could take a whole book to write. And because she was in the circle, she really was deeply, oh, thanks, I would. I might be shaking too much during it. Thanks. I do give a number of talks, especially around the community of Myrtle Beach, but there's so many people, it's a little nerve-wracking. But isn't it? Isn't it a little nerve-wracking? I knew I had an ally. Yeah, she was in the mental health system, such as it was in the early 1950s, and Baba gave permission to have shock treatments. Those were the 1950s shock treatments, terrible. And it was then that great medications were being designed, Thorazine and other things. So I can't help but think Baba had her right in the middle there. And it was a great suffering that she undertook to do that. That's when he said the thing about, "I've had many homes this time." But in the end of that, he said to Elizabeth and Norina and everyone who was there, all the women were there too, "Remember, Elizabeth, I do not leave because this is my home." And at another time he said, "I will tell you why you feel happy here. Those who are connected with me ought to feel happy here for two reasons. Ages ago, this was a place where Baba visited, moved about, and stayed. And the combination of the lake, the ocean, and the woods gives it a unique atmosphere." On Baba's last visit to the center in 1958, he told Elizabeth that he would not return. And this reminds me of so many stories of the Mandali, especially Adi K. Irani, who said, we got so used to Baba saying, I'm definitely going to be here then, I'm definitely going to be doing this, get ready for that. And he would just, he wouldn't do it, or he'd do something else, or he'd change. So it got to a point for them that it was more like, whatever you say, Baba, I'm not going to count on it, but whatever you say, and I'm ready to do it. It was like, that's what dust is, isn't it? So Elizabeth said, okay. She said, she went along with it. In fact, he didn't come back again, physically, and said, well then, who can come to the center, Baba? And he said these great words, those who love me, and those who know of me, and who want to know more. Those who love me, and those who know of me, and who want to know more. And he kept a great interest in the center. There's lots of correspondence about the center all through the 60s. In 58, Mani had sent a letter saying, Baba wants you to keep the lagoon cabin, barn, and his house as nearly as possible as it was when he was there. Arrangements, furnishings, cushions, etc. Mera and we are glad of this, as it will help retain the atmosphere even more so. We'll give of his presence more intimately, and we do try to do that. The center today, since 1958, Baba owned the property during the new life. It was one of the few things he owned, because Elizabeth got the property and then gave it to him, deeded it to him. We have all those deeds that he signed. He also signed, we have some wills that he signed too in the United States, in case he died, that the land would go back to Elizabeth or into a nonprofit. In 59, the final nonprofit was set. It's a 501c3. I imagine this is too, or maybe it's not. And it's a religious organization for rest, meditation, and renewal of the spiritual life. You've all heard that before. Of course, in Baba's time in the 1950s, Meher Center was really a place only of Sahavas, because people only went there because he was there physically. Since then, it has functioned primarily as a retreat center, and it's so quiet, except on motorcycle weekends, and beautiful. However, about 25 years ago, 26 years ago, because of dear Jane Haynes and Mani, the center started this event called the Youth Sahavas, which I've been very fortunate to be part of. And it was the first Sahavas on the center since '58. And it wasn't without its detractors. Let's put it this way, we fought about it, but we got it to happen. And it's an event that's put on by young adults now, only young adults, and a few of us old ones, for teenagers. And the entire center is turned over to teenagers, and it is amazing. The place changes dramatically, not just because they're teenagers, but the energy changes. And we really feel like Baba is going to come through that door. We don't know what form he's going to take. But they are teenagers, so it could be anything. And we're happy to say that many Sufi children have come over the years. And I've already told Buz Connor, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put a plug in for it. If you are going into 9th grade, or you're 13 or 14 and you're homeschooled, come to the Youth Sahavas, come to the center. There actually are no adults around. The first year, adults came onto the center, and it was like being in a zoo for them, you know. Look how cute the kids are, isn't that great? No, we don't do that. So, and some of you have been to the Youth Sahavas. How many of you have been? Anybody around here? Yeah, it really is it's really, the energy's amazing. It's the one time in the year that I feel, personally, Baba shows up for me. And just does. I can always count on it. Just feeling his presence. We have this thing called the barn night, the last night. It's quite extraordinary. It's a group of, 125 young people, and Baba's working through their energy. So they're teenagers, right? So they're sobbing, and they're emotional, and it's great. It is. And they leave there feeling like their world has changed. And it has. Baba has used their energy just as they are. He's come to their level. We also have another Sahavas, which is the Christmas, New Year time, where hundreds of Baba people come. I don't know how many, maybe 300, 400, 500 people come. But Baba cleverly built all these motels right around the center. And so they stay there. And we already have 500 or 600 people who live in Myrtle Beach permanently. So it's a huge thing, a huge bash, and it's a lot of fun. There's no doubt that Meher Baba established Meher Center as a universal spiritual center dedicated to him. The chartered purposes say it is a center devoted and dedicated to the name and spiritual purposes of Meher Baba and to the dissemination of his teachings without supplanting professed religious convictions or beliefs, but for the enhancement and strengthening of the spiritual life. Meher Baba's, because it is Meher Baba's universal center, all who love and follow him and all those who hear his name and who want to know more are welcome, just like Meherazad and Mehrabad. What makes Meher Center? Because it's just land. There's lots of land like it along the coast, less and less as years go by. The cabins are beautiful. What makes it Meher Center, of course, is because his presence has sanctified it. It becomes his home in the West for all time because of what he did there and what he continues to do there. The real treasure of Meher Center is Meher Baba's living and active presence. With regard to centers in general for Meher Baba, and more are coming up, I can't help but recall the infamous so-called argument that took place between John Bass and Ivy Deuce in '56. Do you remember that? Remember reading that? It's fascinating that Baba stirred this thing up so that he could make a point. And it's a great one, because he made the point 2 years earlier in Andhra where they were just a mess. That's a great thing to read, the Andhra mess. That he, it makes it kind of like, oh, we're not so bad after all, are we? This is what human beings do. We try to love God. We kind of get in a funk. And so this is what happened. First, he had Ivy and John embrace. Kitty told us that. Make up, he had them. The argument doesn't really matter. It's what he said that matters. He said this: I want you all to bear in mind one thing, and now emphasize one point, which I emphasized in India also when I called all together at the Andhra meeting, 1954. I said that for me, there is no need for centers, for different places, nor different groups, with different heads or names. There's no need. My center is the heart of every lover. Every lover with a heart that loves Baba is a center. The second point I want to emphasize, is that whoever wants to work spreading my message of love and truth absolutely needs a central office and groups of workers who can function from that central office. There's always a need for a group to have a center. I think you guys took the office thing to its max. This is amazing. I would love to come to work here. You can have many such centers, he said. Myrtle Beach is such a center. It stretches for many miles. He also then stressed the importance of having separate groups. When I read that, I thought, that's kind of amazing. Harmony and all of that doesn't mean we're all the same. It means separate groups he wanted. And mainly in maintaining harmony between groups. And I think that that's a really big thing for our community, because why should we agree on everything? We may deeply disagree on things. So what? Baba knows that. He set it up so that we probably will disagree on some things deeply. But I think he's also said to us, do it with harmony, work it out for my love, After having been involved with the center's work for many years, I thought I'd throw in my 2 cents at the end, near the end, not quite. So don't get your hopes up. Charmaine got a lot of time. She traveled further, so I think that's how they divvied up the time. She came furthest. I've come to feel that centers for Meher Baba, established himself, or ones we establish in his name, have 3 main purposes, at least 3. No doubt there are many more. First, as a place where all who come can experience his presence and love. Where all who come can experience his presence and love. That's the most important thing. I think that's the work of all workers. Anybody who comes through this door, our door at the center, that's our work. That we're there for them. We're servants of Baba. And we want to create an atmosphere where people can feel at home and feel his presence. Second, as a place to spread his message of love and truth. I think you guys are doing that here. It's kind of amazing. There is not a bigger mastery and servitude on earth. This is, call Guinness, whatever they call it, Book of World Records. This is it. But I don't want to walk on it. Are you going to put a railing around it? Third, for those who follow Meher Baba, those of us in this room who follow Meher Baba, physical centers can serve as a living reminder of what is most important, to remember him with every breath, to dedicate our every thought, word, and deed only to him, and that this remembrance and dedication is the highest opportunity and blessing we'll ever have. He makes this point a little bit differently, and I'm almost done, in Dehradun, in the highest of the high. I'm not going to read it all, just pieces of it, because it's quite great. He puts it into perspective. If you're my disciple, then get this, he said. If you truly and in all faith accept your Baba as the highest of the high, it behooves you to lay down your life at his feet, rather than to crave the fulfillment of your desires. Not your one life, but your millions of lives would be but a small sacrifice to place at the feet of one such as Baba, who is the highest of the high. For Baba's unbounded love is the only sure and unfailing guide to lead you safely through the innumerable blind alleys of your transient life. Know you all that if I am the highest of the high, my role demands that I strip you of all your possessions and wants, consume all your desires, and make you desireless rather than satisfy your desires. Sadhus, saints, yogis, wallis can give you what you want. That's what's so beautiful about this sculpture, how it's hollowed out in the center. And that hollowing out is what he does. And that hollowing out is no fun. But it brings great joy. Through all the work, but I take away your wants and free you from attachments and liberate you from the bondage of ignorance. I am the one to take, not the one to give what you want or as you want. But of course, what he leaves behind has been there all along, and that is his love. As Baba indicated, it is no joke to be the lover of the Ancient One. In fact, at East West Gathering, he said, if you think the spiritual, I'm paraphrasing, if you think the spiritual life is fun, fun will be made of you. Through all the work and challenges he gives us, he stirs us up, and through remembrance and surrender, he is able to take us from where we are to where he is, which is, of course, the only point. So my prayer is this: may all of us who have the great privilege of serving Meher Babas at centers founded by and for him always strive to uphold his message of love and truth first and foremost in our hearts, so that we can serve him as he should be served. Jai Baba.